Michael Jackson, the king of pop. That's the name the world knows. The legend celebrated on every stage. In every corner of the globe. His career was a dazzling symphony of chart-topping hits, groundbreaking performances, and a cultural influence that has yet to be surpassed. From the moonwalk to the timeless beats of Thriller, Michael's artistry transcended generations, redefining the very meaning of entertainment. But behind the glittering lights and deafening applause lies a far more complex, hidden narrative, one woven with pain, secrecy, and unanswered questions. For decades, countless stories have surrounded his life, some inspiring, others dark and unsettling. His journey from an oppressed childhood to global superstardom is nothing short of extraordinary. But so too were the shadows that trailed him at every step. Whispers of secret societies, allegations of personal misconduct, and the mystery surrounding his final days have kept his name alive in headlines long after his death. While millions remember him for his music, millions more remain captivated by the enigma of the man himself. Yet, how much of what we think we know is real? And how much is simply myth, spun from rumor and speculation? Was Michael Jackson a victim of relentless public scrutiny, crushed beneath the weight of fame? Or were the controversies that clung to his name rooted in truths too uncomfortable for the world to accept? These are questions that continue to divide fans, critics, and the media alike, questions that refuse to fade, no matter how many years pass. This is not just a story about an artist. It's a story about a human being who lived in the harsh spotlight of fame from the moment he could hold a microphone. It's about the price of global adoration, the toll of perfectionism, and the fragility that exists beneath even the strongest public image. In today's exploration, we will uncover the defining moments of his life, the triumphs that shaped him, the tragedies that haunted him, and the controversies that pursued him to the very end. Prepare to journey beyond the stage, beyond the music, and into the hidden corridors of a life both celebrated and condemned. This is the story of Michael Jackson, his glory, his suffering, and the enduring mystery that surrounds the king of pop. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana, a small industrial city cloaked in the haze of steel mills and factory smoke. He was the eighth of 10 children in the Jackson family, a crowded home where love often struggled to survive under the weight of poverty. His father, Joseph Jackson, worked long hours at a steel plant, and on weekends played rhythm and blues in a local band. But for Joseph, music was more than a passion, it was a way out. And he was determined that his children would be the ones to break free from the life of manual labor that defined their neighborhood. That determination came at a cost. Joseph's methods were harsh, often crossing the line into cruelty. He demanded relentless rehearsals, using belts, switches, or whatever was within reach to enforce discipline. Michael would later recall moments when his father's temper left him hanging upside down by one leg, beaten until exhaustion took over. There was no time for playground games or carefree laughter. Childhood was replaced by the grind of performance. In Michael's own words, it was a living hell, disguised as preparation for success. By the time Michael was just 6 years old, he had joined his older brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, and Marlon, in a family band then known as the Jackson Brothers. His natural talent quickly stood out, the way he moved, the way he could pour raw emotion into a song well beyond his years. In 1966, the group rebranded as the Jackson 5, with Michael and Jermaine sharing lead vocals. It wasn't long before they began winning local talent shows and booking gigs across Indiana. Their breakthrough came when they signed with Motown Records in 1968. Suddenly, the Jackson 5 were catapulted from small stages to the national spotlight. Their first single with Motown, I Want You Back, shot straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, followed by a string of hits, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There. Michael, barely into his teens, was already a household name. But success brought its own kind of pressure. As the group's popularity soared, the schedule became grueling. Constant touring, television appearances, and recording sessions left little room for rest. Michael's voice, his image, and his charisma became the centerpiece of the group's brand, making him both its greatest asset and its most vulnerable member. The adulation of fans was intoxicating, but the expectations placed upon him were crushing. By the early 1970s, the Jackson 5 phenomenon, dubbed Jackson Mania by the press, had reached fever pitch. Yet behind the scenes, tensions were growing. Michael was beginning to chafe under the control of both his father and Motown's strict creative direction. He yearned to explore music on his own terms. In 1972, at just 14, he released his first solo album, Got to Be There, which signaled the start of a parallel career that would eventually eclipse the group's success. As the decade wore on, Michael's ambitions only intensified. After leaving Motown in 1975 for CBS Records, the Jacksons, as they were now called, enjoyed moderate success. But Michael's solo ventures were drawing more attention. Collaborations with legendary producer Quincy Jones would prove transformative. The 1979 release of Off the Wall marked a turning point, 4 top 10 singles, including Don't Stop Till You Get Enough and Rock With You, cemented Michael as a solo superstar. Then came Thriller in 1982, a cultural earthquake. The album shattered records, selling over 100 million copies worldwide and dominating the charts for months. Its groundbreaking music videos, from the zombie spectacle of the title track to the noir drama of Billie Jean, redefined the medium. The moonwalk became a global phenomenon. Michael was no longer just a pop star. He was an icon whose influence crossed racial, cultural, and national boundaries. But as the world celebrated his meteoric rise, Michael himself was entering a new chapter, one that would bring as much pain as glory. Fame had opened doors, but it had also built walls. His private life was becoming increasingly guarded, and every public appearance was dissected for clues about the man behind the music. His physical appearance began to change, sparking rumors and speculation. The once wide-eyed boy from Gary was transforming into something the public couldn't quite understand, and it wouldn't be long before the world's fascination turned into obsession. From the shadows of a troubled childhood to the blinding spotlight of superstardom, Michael Jackson had climbed higher than most could dream. But at such heights, the fall is always closer than it seems. The very forces that had propelled him to the pinnacle of music would soon become the ones pulling him into controversy, scandal, and an unrelenting battle to defend not just his career, but his very identity. In the next chapter, the story would shift from the triumph of the stage to the turmoil of the man himself, where questions of race, illness, and personal choice collided with the harsh judgments of a world that both loved and doubted him. By the mid-1980s, Michael Jackson was not only dominating the music industry, he was redefining it. His albums were breaking sales records, his performances were global events, and his every move seemed to set a new cultural trend. But as the decade progressed, the public began to notice something unexpected. Michael's appearance was changing. Most notably, his skin tone seemed to be growing lighter with each passing year. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable in photographs and music videos. But by the early 1990s, the difference was undeniable. The boy who had proudly represented African American artistry on the world stage now had skin that appeared almost pale. The tabloids pounced, spinning sensational headlines about his supposed desire to become white. Comedians mocked him on television. Former fans accused him of rejecting his own heritage. For Michael, the accusations were deeply painful. He insisted that the truth was far from what the public imagined. In 1993, during a rare and candid interview with Oprah Winfrey, he finally addressed the rumors head-on. He revealed that he had been diagnosed with vitiligo, a condition in which the skin loses pigment in irregular patches, often leaving a mottled appearance, to maintain a more even skin tone under the scrutiny of cameras. He used makeup and, according to later medical reports, depigmenting creams prescribed by doctors. "I am proud to be black," he told Oprah. "I have never wanted to be anything else. This is something I cannot control. It hurts me when people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am." His words resonated with millions. But for some, the explanation was not enough to silence the skepticism. Medical records and autopsy findings released after his death would later confirm his claim. The coroner's report noted a significant loss of melanocytes, the cells responsible for skin color, consistent with vitiligo. Tubes of benekine and hydroquinone, both common treatments for advanced cases, were found in his home. In truth, Michael had not abandoned his identity. He had been battling a chronic invisible skin condition in the most public way imaginable. The controversy, however, extended beyond his skin tone. Over the years, Michael's facial features also changed, his nose slimmer, his jawline more defined. Plastic surgeons speculated about multiple rhinoplasties, chin implants, and other cosmetic procedures. Michael admitted to undergoing 2 nose surgeries, claiming they were for medical reasons to improve his breathing and enhance his ability to sing. Whether out of privacy, embarrassment, or a desire to control his image, he never disclosed more, leaving the public to fill the gaps with their own theories. These changes became a focal point for a media eager to turn the king of pop into a spectacle. In an era before social media, tabloids were the main source of celebrity gossip, and Michael Jackson was their most valuable subject. Wild claims circulated that he slept in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber to slow aging, that he wanted to buy the bones of the Elephant Man, that he was slowly remaking himself into something inhuman. Many of these stories were entirely fabricated, yet they stuck, reinforcing the image of Michael as a strange and isolated figure detached from reality. But behind the sensational headlines was a man navigating the crushing intersection of fame, illness, and personal insecurity. Vitiligo was not just a cosmetic issue, it carried a heavy emotional toll. For someone whose career depended on visual performance, every patch of discolored skin could feel like a spotlight on his imperfections. The makeup and treatments were not about vanity, but about survival in an industry that relentlessly scrutinized appearance. In private letters and statements to friends, Michael expressed frustration that his humanitarian work and musical innovations were being overshadowed by discussions about his looks. "Why," he once wrote, "do they focus on my skin when there is so much more I want to share with the world?" Yet, the fascination with his transformation never faded. For some, it was proof of deeper psychological struggles. For others, it was a testament to the unbearable pressures of global superstardom. By the mid-1990s, Michael had accepted that the rumors might never end. What he could control, however, was his art, and so, even as public debate over his appearance raged on, he returned to the studio, channeling his emotions into music that spoke of injustice, resilience, and unity. But the storm around his personal life was only beginning. The next chapter in his journey would plunge him into a far more dangerous and damaging controversy, one that would threaten not only his career, but his freedom. By the late 1980s, Michael Jackson had achieved a level of fame that few humans in history could comprehend. He was no longer just a singer, he was a global symbol. His every movement tracked by millions of eyes. But with fame came a hunger for privacy, a longing to create a space untouched by the demands of the outside world. That desire led him to a sprawling property in the hills of Santa Barbara County, California, a place he would transform into his own private paradise. In 1987, Michael purchased the estate for a reported $19 million. He named it Neverland, after the magical realm from Peter Pan, the story of a boy who never grew up. It was, in many ways, the embodiment of Michael's inner world, an escape from the traumas of his childhood and a sanctuary from the pressures of fame. Neverland was no ordinary home, it was a wonderland. A private amusement park complete with a Ferris wheel, carousels, a zoo, a movie theater, manicured gardens, and whimsical structures straight out of a fairy tale. For Michael, Neverland was more than a residence, it was a statement. Here, he could recapture the childhood he felt had been stolen from him by years of relentless rehearsals and public performance. He invited friends, family, and, most famously, children from hospitals and charities to visit, offering them free rides, games, and treats. To many, he was a generous, childlike soul sharing his joy with those who needed it most. But in the shadows of its fairy tale gates, Neverland would become the focal point of one of the most damaging controversies of his life. In 1993, a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler and his father accused Michael of sexually abusing the child. The allegations sent shockwaves across the globe. The media frenzy was immediate, and Neverland, once a symbol of innocence, was recast as something sinister. Michael denied the accusations, insisting that his relationships with children were pure, rooted in mutual trust and shared innocence. He claimed that he often let children stay at Neverland because he wanted them to experience joy, not harm. The investigation was intense. Police searched Neverland, seizing photographs, videos, and personal items. Some tabloids reported that they found questionable material. Others pointed out that what they seized was legal and inconclusive. In the end, the case never went to criminal trial. Instead, Michael's legal team reached a civil settlement with the Chandler family for a reported $23 million. Michael maintained that the settlement was not an admission of guilt, but a way to avoid a drawn-out court battle that would further damage his reputation. Still, in the court of public opinion, the scars remained. A decade later, the accusations would resurface, this time with a new accuser. In 2003, a documentary titled Living with Michael Jackson, hosted by British journalist Martin Bashir, aired to massive viewership. In one scene, Michael was shown holding hands with a 13-year-old boy named Gavin Arvizo, explaining that he often let children sleep in his bedroom, though he insisted nothing inappropriate ever happened. The footage reignited public debate, and before long, Arvizo and his family accused Michael of molestation. This time, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented a narrative of manipulation, alleging that Michael used gifts, attention, and the allure of Neverland to groom young boys. The defense countered with testimonies from children and parents who insisted that Michael had never harmed them, and that the allegations were driven by financial motives. The trial was grueling. Over 5 months in 2005, the world watched as witnesses took the stand. Evidence was scrutinized, and the media dissected every detail. In the end, the jury acquitted Michael on all charges. Supporters celebrated the verdict as vindication. Critics argued that fame and wealth had shielded him from accountability. Even after the trial, the allegations would never fully fade. In 2019, a documentary titled Leaving Neverland brought the accusations back into the spotlight. Two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, claimed that Michael had abused them when they were children, offering detailed and disturbing accounts. Once again, the world was divided. Some saw the film as credible, a long overdue reckoning with uncomfortable truths. Others condemned it as a one-sided attack on a man who could no longer defend himself. Through it all, Michael maintained his innocence until his death. He insisted that his friendships with children were born from empathy, not malice, that he identified with them because he, too, felt robbed of his childhood. For his fans, Neverland remained a symbol of generosity and imagination. For his detractors, it was evidence of something darker. The truth about what happened inside the gates of Neverland may never be fully known. The allegations left deep fractures in Michael's public image, reshaping the way the world saw him. What was once a place of laughter and escape had become an enduring question mark, one that still hangs over his legacy. As the 2000s progressed, the weight of the controversies, the constant legal battles, and the unrelenting media scrutiny began to take their toll. Michael's public appearances grew rarer, and behind closed doors, his physical and emotional health was deteriorating. The next chapter in his story would bring the most shocking twist of all, a sudden and tragic death that would spark yet another storm of speculation and conspiracy. By early 2009, Michael Jackson was a man caught between two worlds. Publicly, he was preparing for what was billed as the greatest comeback in music history, a series of 50 sold-out concerts at London's O2 Arena, titled This Is It. Privately, however, he was fragile, battling chronic insomnia, anxiety, and the lingering toll of years spent under relentless scrutiny. To the outside world, the announcement of This Is It was a triumph, proof that the king of pop still commanded the world's stage. But behind closed doors, the preparation was taking a heavy toll. Michael's schedule was grueling, his perfectionism as intense as ever, and his body was struggling to keep up. Sleep, the simplest human necessity, had become an elusive luxury. In an effort to rest, Michael had turned to his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, hired to oversee his health during the run-up to the concerts. Murray's primary role became that of managing Michael's severe insomnia. The solution, according to testimony later revealed in court, was a powerful hospital-grade anesthetic, propofol, a drug typically used to induce unconsciousness during surgery. For weeks, Murray administered it nightly in Michael's bedroom, a practice that defied standard medical protocol and carried serious risks. June 25, 2009, began like many of those final days. According to Murray, Michael was anxious about rehearsals and desperate for sleep. Throughout the night and into the morning, the physician reportedly gave him a series of sedatives, culminating in a dose of propofol. Murray claimed it was a small amount, just enough to help Michael drift off, and that he left the room briefly. When he returned, he found the singer unresponsive. What happened next remains a point of controversy. Prosecutors would later allege that Murray wasted critical minutes attempting to hide evidence, including vials of medication, before calling emergency services. At 12:21 p.m., a 911 call was finally placed from Michael's Holmby Hills mansion. Paramedics arrived to find the world's most famous entertainer in cardiac arrest. He was rushed to UCLA Medical Center, where doctors attempted to revive him for more than an hour. At 2:26 p.m., Michael Joseph Jackson was pronounced dead. The world reacted with shock and disbelief. Crowds gathered outside the hospital, at Neverland, and in cities around the globe. News channels ran wall-to-wall coverage. For millions, it felt as though a piece of their own childhood had been torn away. But as the grief set in, so did the questions. An autopsy later confirmed that Michael had died from acute propofol intoxication, compounded by the presence of benzodiazepines, a class of sedatives, in his system. The coroner ruled his death a homicide, setting the stage for one of the most high-profile criminal trials in recent memory. The focus immediately shifted to Dr. Conrad Murray. Prosecutors argued that his actions constituted gross negligence, administering a dangerous surgical anesthetic in a home setting, without proper monitoring equipment, and then failing to respond appropriately when things went wrong. The defense countered that Michael, addicted to various medications for years, had begged for propofol and may have self-administered a fatal dose while Murray was out of the room. The trial, which began in 2011, painted a disturbing picture of the months leading up to Michael's death. Witnesses described a man desperate for rest, willing to risk dangerous treatments just to sleep. Emails from concert promoters revealed growing concerns about his health, and the testimony of medical experts left little doubt. Propofol should never have been used as a sleep aid outside of a hospital. On November 7, 2011, the jury found Conrad Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison but served only 2, citing good behavior and overcrowding. For Michael's family and fans, the verdict offered some measure of justice, but it did little to end the speculation about his final days. Some believe that Murray was a convenient scapegoat, that others in Michael's inner circle bore responsibility for enabling his dependence on prescription drugs. Others see the tragedy as the inevitable result of decades spent in an industry that demands perfection at any cost. There are even conspiracy theories, whispers that Michael's death was orchestrated to exploit his music catalog or to silence him. None of these claims have been proven, but they persist, fueled by the mystery that seems to have followed Michael throughout his life. In the years since, it has taken on a haunting significance. The documentary assembled from rehearsal footage shows a performer still capable of commanding the stage, but also hints at a man pushing himself to the edge. His voice, his dance, his meticulous attention to detail, all were intact. Yet behind his smile, there is an unmistakable weariness. Michael Jackson's death closed the final chapter on one of the most extraordinary, and most scrutinized, lives in entertainment history. But in many ways, it was not an ending. His music continues to dominate streaming charts. His influence is visible in artists across every genre. His controversies remain subjects of debate. And his legacy, like the man himself, resists simple definition. For some, he is the greatest entertainer who ever lived, a visionary whose art will echo for centuries. For others, he is a cautionary tale about the price of fame, the corrosive nature of media, and the dangers of living in a world without boundaries. What is certain is that Michael Jackson's story did not end on June 25, 2009. It lives on, in the voices that sing his songs, in the fans who still moonwalk across living rooms, and in the questions that linger unanswered. Questions about the boy from Gary, Indiana, who became a king, and about the kingdom that, for all its magic, could not protect him from the shadows. In the end, Michael Jackson's life was a paradox, a dazzling spectacle of light and sound, yet shadowed by whispers that never ceased. He was adored by millions and scrutinized by millions more. His voice could fill stadiums, but in his private moments, He often seemed like a man calling out into an empty room. The boy who once sang about a world filled with love had spent his own life searching for it, sometimes finding it in the roar of a crowd, sometimes in the laughter of children, and sometimes only in the fleeting silence between rehearsals. Neverland, the place he built to keep that childlike spirit alive, became both his sanctuary and his curse, a mirror reflecting the world's wonder and its suspicion. His death, sudden and shocking, was not the peaceful closing of a life's chapter. It was an explosion, sending ripples through the music industry, the courts, the headlines, and the hearts of those who had grown up with his songs. For some, it was the loss of a hero. For others, it was a complicated ending to a complicated story. And for all of us, it was the moment we realized that even kings are mortal. Perhaps that is the enduring mystery of Michael Jackson. We may never know the full truth behind every rumor, every trial, every choice he made. Was he a victim of his own generosity, trusting too much in a world that saw him as a commodity? Was he the casualty of a machine that chews up talent and spits it out when it can no longer perform? Or was his life, and death, simply the tragic price of chasing perfection? What remains is the music, the beats, the melodies, the messages that, for a few minutes at a time, could unite people across continents and cultures. They remind us of the sheer power of art to transcend the flaws of the artist, to outlive the hands that created it. And maybe that's why the mystery endures. Because Michael Jackson was never just a man. He was a canvas onto which the world projected its dreams, its fears, and its judgments. And even now, years after his passing, we still can't stop looking, wondering if somewhere in all the noise lies the truth. As the lights fade and the final note lingers, one question remains. Will we ever let the king of pop rest? Or will his story be told and retold, changing shape with each telling, until it becomes legend? This is where our journey ends for now. But in the echoes of his music, in the sway of a dance step that defied gravity, Michael Jackson still lives. And perhaps, that's the closest thing to immortality any of us can hope for.